Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Hogging the Mic, the Boar's official podcast, bringing you student journalism like you've never heard it before. This week we're speaking to two special guests, one current Warwick student and one alumni who has gone on to hold an exciting role at a leading British magazine.
As you'll know by now, we normally start off by spotlighting an article from the board this week. However, this spotlight is on Freshers Week this week, which is fast approaching.
We're bringing you a conversation with one of the Boar's two editor-in-chiefs, Martin Day. In this chat with Martin, we spoke about his time at the Boar and how to get involved at the newspaper this academic year.
And after you've heard from Martin, we'll be bringing you another alumni interview too, so don't say we don't spoil you.
Ahead of Freshers Week, we're delighted to be chatting to one of the board's current editors-in-chief, Martin Day. Martin and Anna Bickerton are co-editors-in-chief and have already spent a term in the role. Now they're preparing to welcome a whole host of incoming freshers.
We'll start off by asking you the question that we always ask our podcast guests. What initially drew you to the Boar?
I would say experience, because that's what they try to drill into you like every single time you go to a journalism training thing. But actually it wasn't. I just really wanted to do journalism. And the Boar, you'll have seen this from the number of alumni you've been able to attract to the podcast, is, incredibly prolific. We're incredibly well known across, genuinely the whole British journalism industry. So coming to an open day, I think in year 12, I went to the Boar stand and they were like, we're the best journalism, we're the best student newspaper in the country. You have to come to us. So I was instantly sold. I came to Warwick for the student newspaper more than anything else.
So before we talk about Freshers Week, as we mentioned, you're editor-in-chief along with Anna. So can you explain to us what editor-in-chief means and what it involves?
It's a lot of admin. It's a lot of telling people to do things, and asking people to do things, and then sort of remembering other stuff. I could say it's big picture stuff, it's the vision thing, but it's just quite a lot of admin, really. Managing emails, sending emails, managing emails. Sometimes there's money. That's fun. I like that bit. There's comparatively little journalism. I used to be the news editor. That felt a lot more like a journalism role. This is more of a managerial role, but it's very fulfilling. So, I can't complain.
So now that we're clear on that, can you tell us what your favourite article you've written for the Boar has been?
I'd say, not to brag, I've written 106 articles. It's a wide roster to choose from. Probably to sound quite hokey, it's the ones that made a difference, I want to say. Because, there's only so many times you can write the same sort of bit of fluff and throw it into the ether and no one reads it. Occasionally, though, when we have reported something, I was over the summer of 2024 for ages chasing around the whole Warwick Tory story with the controversy that happened around that. And it was incredibly rewarding around September time when we were running a story. We ended up essentially bouncing the university into a statement. They weren't going to do anything, and then they did something because we said, hi, we know about this, and we're going to write a story about it. Little moments like that are quite rewarding, and you end up taking photographs in the piazza, and then Stuart Croft waves at you, and it's quite a bit worrying. But no, that's definitely the most rewarding part, because it feels like you're actually tangibly achieving something.
And apart from all of the writing, what's been your favourite moment at the Boar so far?
There's so many to choose from. We have a wonderful social list for people who might be interested in that. However, it's probably not actually a Boar event so much. It would be the SPA conference, the Student Publication Association, back in April of this year. We went all the way down to Devon, a small group of us. That was very nice. That was basically all things journalism. It felt like sort of a suitable culmination of all the time I'd spent at the Boar so far. That you could get a really large group of people, all from the Boar, and send them 40 miles to the middle of nowhere to go do student journalism in a conference. So that was very rewarding. I didn't actually attend the awards night where we won massively, but from all accounts it was very successful. So yeah, that's probably my best memory.
Yeah, well, we all enjoyed SPA as well. Yeah. So Obviously, we're here to talk about Freshers Week as well. So what events is the Boar putting on during Freshers Week this year?
On Tuesday of Freshers Week, we have a Meet the Exec sort of social. The Boar has one of the largest execs of any society on campus. I think we have the largest, actually, exec on campus in a society. And hopefully we'll be able to attract as many of them as possible to a sort of casual drinks social happening in T-Bar on Tuesday at, I don't know, I think 5 or 6 p.m. You'd have to check the fresher calendar. But no, it'll be a very relaxed kind of, you can socialize with the people who you'll hopefully be pitching your articles to. And, you can learn, but actually they're just also students. I think there's definitely, when people start out, there's an idea of, oh, these people are so intimidating. But no, we're also amateurs, so it's fine. It's a good way to meet people. On Wednesday, as with half of every other society, it's Freshers Fair. So we'll be manning a stall from beginning till end. So you can find us there. That's another great way to. It's a great way to pick up our most recent paper. We'll have several stacks of that. You'll be able to ask any questions, and we'll be able to answer, hopefully. Also, we'll maybe have a typewriter, so that's fun. And on Thursday, the day after that, at 1 p.m. in the Ramful building, so we'll be doing a sort of tutorial session to all the aspects of the Boar, how to get involved, how to write and pitch, and also just how to do journalism. So stuff like my favorite things, lead sentences and the inverted pyramid. These are all terms that you'll hear at the Boar 101, which should be a good way to get into student journalism if you are interested.
And also on that, how can people get further details and get involved, whether they're a first year or not?
Oh, well, on our Instagram, which is a great way to get involved, on the Warwick Boar Instagram, which is at Warwick Boar, we have a little how-to guide, which has been pinned onto the main account, which has a sort of structured step-by-step guide to getting involved. Basically, though, we manage everything through WhatsApp. So as soon as you join the various WhatsApp chats that we have one for each section. You can basically sort of learn how it works just from watching how other people do. There's a system of pitches where, like, article ideas. If you just message one of the editors and say, I'd like to do this, they will always say yes. I don't think there's any situation where they'll say no. You might be directed to a different section, but they'll never like reject you outright. Or you can take one of the article ideas that we put out into the chats. It's very, very easy. All you have to do is buy a membership, join the WhatsApp, and you're basically done. Obviously, you have to write the article too. But no, it's never been more easy, I think.
And to finish off our interview, we usually ask what advice our guests would give to students currently at the Boar. But for you, we're going to switch things up ever so slightly and ask what advice you'd give to incoming freshers at Warwick, whether it's Boar related or not.
Oh, I think it's both. It's get involved with absolutely everything you can, like stick your, toes into every metaphorical pool of water. Because as far as journalism goes, that's great. It means that you have a very good awareness of like the environment that you'll be doing student journalism in, because, every society, do sports events, do non-sports events, do bake sock, I guess. Stuff like that. It's a great way to actually learn what the stories on campus are, but also it's just a great way to, meet people. I think the University of Warwick has an amazing societies culture, more so than most other universities I've visited. And I think that's very, very lucky. You're very lucky to come to Warwick and do all the societies here.
Now you're ready for Freshers Week, you can listen to our chat with the one and only Jasmine Parker.
Jasmine is the sub-editor for Tatler and launched the Boar's first ever podcast a few years ago during the pandemic.
It was a privilege to chat to Jasmine on our very own podcast, and we hope you enjoy listening to all that she had to say. Our guest today is someone who started off at the Boar as Deputy Arts Editor in her first year. She then went on to edit the section in her second year, before stepping up to take on the challenge of Editor-in-Chief. Since finishing at Warwick, she has gone on to study a Master's in Magazine Journalism in City in London. And now she works as a sub-editor in the fashion and lifestyle magazine Tatler. Jasmine Parker, welcome to Hogging the Mic.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. We're really excited to have you. So I'm going to start off with a question that we always begin the podcast with. What drew you to the Boar?
You know, it's funny. When I started at Warwick, I had absolutely no intentions of joining the Boar whatsoever. I worked on my school newspaper for 4 years, and I led it for 4 years. I started writing for it when I was in about year 8. So I gave a huge amount of time to it, and I just felt sort of like I was done with that. And I remember my A-level history teacher actually said to me, "I really hope you continue journalism at university." And I was like, no. And then my flatmate in Freshers Week decided to go to the Boar introduction meeting, and I was like, okay, I'll go along. And then something in me, when they spoke about the process of hiring deputy section editors, I was like, I want that. And suddenly I was like all in.
Yeah, that is very similar to what happened to me.
So obviously, as we touched upon, you started at the Boar as deputy arts editor before working your way up to being the editor of the section. So you said you went along, you were interested in becoming a deputy. What was it in particular that drew you to the arts section?
I remember they spoke about having press tickets to shows, and that just sounded like the most exciting thing ever. I think when I was doing my A-levels, I tried to start a little blog where I reviewed theatre shows. I remember one time I emailed the RSC press office and was like, can I have some images to use on my blog? And they obviously never got back to me. So the idea of being able to work with these professional theatres was so exciting. I mean, I remember at one point I got to go and review a brand new show at the RSC, and they shared my review on their social media. And that was the biggest career highlight for me thus far. It was so exciting to have gone from, going to these plays just because I was studying them at school for my exams to actually being invited along personally to review their brand new shows. It's such an honor.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great part of being at the Boar, having those opportunities. And we've touched upon that with Reese as well. Reese was talking in our last episode about those opportunities and the things you can get to do. So I see why the art section did draw you in. And I think we've all had those opportunities as well.
Yeah, I mean, Lucy's definitely been to a lot of concerts through the Boar.
Yeah. That is, again, I had the same pipeline of, I was told that they get music press tickets. So I immediately signed up.
You got to make most of it.
Yeah, you got to do it.
So after you dabbled in the art section and you were editor of the section, deputy editor, you became editor-in-chief in 2020 in March. We all know that month was very memorable as we went into the first COVID lockdown. What was it like becoming EIC, which is a very big job, just as everything was starting to shut down and change in a very big way?
Yeah, I think it was the following Friday after I officially took over that was I remember it was Friday the 13th of March. That was our last proper uni day. I know, so fortuitous, right? I went home and I didn't come back for the rest of the year, and it felt like that was kind of it. So it was definitely a wild time to take over. I think it was particularly challenging because kind of within an instant, everything I'd been told about how to run the Boar, I felt like I was very well trained by Katie and Isabel, who I took it over from. But obviously so quickly, everything they had told me was just out the window. It's we can't print. What are we going to do? How are we going to share our content? And really the whole year was kind of learning to adjust to that. I'm really proud of the way that we did. We took on TikTok for the first time. We tried to come up with lots of new digital strategies and ways of doing things online. And we did manage to print a couple of issues, I think. But really everything was a challenge. And I think it made it all the more of a learning experience.
Absolutely. And like you said, being editor-in-chief is you take on so many different challenges, and that changed so much during COVID. But did you find there was a difference between did you find there was a difference between editor-in-chief and being a section editor, and how did you find that step up from arts editor to editor-in-chief?
Huge difference, and always a challenge. I think section editors don't really see just how different the job of running the whole newspaper is. I think mainly because that production fortnight, the first week is section editors working on their layouts, and then the entire second week is us perfecting them. It's a hugely different job. some of the like issues that cropped up that I had to deal with, I feel like other people wouldn't have imagined. You know, it taught me so much, and it is so much responsibility. I mean, the Boar is one of the country's largest student newspapers and definitely one of the most prestigious. So it's a huge amount of pressure. I also hadn't realized how different the Boar is from other student newspapers around the country. I think a lot of other papers, if you're the editor-in-chief, you do that role for a term. Or, for example, at some universities, you take a year out and it's a sabbatical. Some universities, it's a role in the student union, so it's paid. So this was, you know, a whole year of my life alongside my studies that was a volunteer role. You know, it's so much extra work to take on, but I really enjoyed it.
And as well as being arts editor and editor-in-chief, we're speaking today on Hogging the Mic, but you were involved in setting up the Boar's very first podcast, Creating Conversation.
Oh my gosh, I was, yes.
Was released 5 years ago. So why did you set up that podcast? And also, what did you learn from doing that?
I really can't remember why we set up the podcast. I would assume it was because we couldn't print anymore and we felt like we needed to have this kind of different method of getting ourselves out there. I think it's funny because that Boar tagline, Creating Conversation, really lends itself to a podcast. And that was what we went with. What was the other part of the question?
What did you learn from?
What did I learn? I mean, it was really my first experience of like producing a podcast. Our wonderful multimedia editor, Abby, used to edit them for us. So I didn't do anything on the technical side. But I think in terms of thinking out like planning, what's going to go into it, who's going to speak about what, I think that like planning production element is so useful for so many different things in journalism. And, you know, podcasting, I think, is such a skill to have. I went on to do a module in it at City and I like really developed those skills. And I think that's such a good skill set to have in your kind of weaponry if you're going to go into journalism professionally, to be able to put on your CV that you can do that, I think is so helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously, you touched on how the podcast might have been a product of a lack of print editions due to COVID and lockdown. In what other ways did the paper change in terms of there obviously being no print, there not being anyone on campus in the same way as normal? What kind of things did you find yourself covering and how did you find yourself covering them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a time when national news was so interested in student stories. I remember there was that whole thing at Manchester where, I mean, there was so many student protests about the way that students were being treated. There was obviously a lot of conversation about that at Warwick. I remember our brilliant news editors, Nicole and Ollie, covered so many of those stories. You know, all the poor first years who were basically trapped in their flats, you know, with people they just met, not being able to go out, not going to being able to make other friends. I think that was so difficult. And our news team did such a brilliant job of covering those stories. I remember one of the things we started doing was we used to share all the PDFs on Issue so that people could read it online. And we discovered there was actually this way of you could like upload the stories in a sort of Apple News kind of way. So you could read them like nicely formatted on your phone, not just like reading the PDF of the newspaper. And I think that was like a cool thing to figure out and play around with.
And yeah, so that was one success that you had during your year as editor-in-chief, but your year as editor-in-chief was a really successful one for the Boar. The Boar had 13 SPA nominations, including for all 3 major categories. You won Best Publication in the Midlands and a Warwick SU Impact Award. So that's like a really impressive set of awards. What do you think you did that year? You obviously touched upon some of the things you did, but what do you think made that year such a success for the Boar? And do you still carry a lot of that experience forward to today?
Yeah, I'm so proud of everything we did in the Boar. I think the Boar is such a fantastic training ground for young journalists. And I think we've been through a few years of having really strong editors-in-chief who I learned everything from them. I mean, Katie and Isabel were such mentors to me and Kate, my co-editor-in-chief. We really learned everything from them and they were utterly invaluable and giving us advice all the time. We had a little group chat with them. So whenever we had a problem, we would go to them. And then when Karish took over, I did the same for her. So it's like a little network of passing on the baton of experience. I'm so sorry, I've forgotten the rest of the question.
Yeah, and do you still carry a lot of that experience forward to today and I will touch upon your role today, just later in the podcast, but do you look back on your time at the Boar and bring that forward into what you're still doing today? I
think all of my experience at the Boar has been so helpful. I think it's where I really started journalism. And I think that kind of idea of like getting started, finding stories, knowing what it takes to produce a paper, you know, I think the thing about the Boar is kind of when you're a student, there are limited resources. You have to be kind of savvy with your time. You're trying to spin so many plates at once. I think that kind of resourcefulness and being able to balance a few different things is always a really helpful professional skill, no matter what industry you go into.
And after graduating from Warwick, you went on to study a master's in magazine journalism at City University in London, which we have touched on very briefly. But as well as doing that, you carried out sort of different internships, like at Topps Towels and OK Magazine. How did that time in the working world and those internships in particular help shape your understanding of journalism and also help you when you were studying journalism?
Yeah, so I did 3 weeks at OK just as I was in my last term at City. I mean, it was so helpful. It was my first time like in a professional, well, I say in a professional newsroom. It was all online over email and like Zoom. But it was my first experience of professional journalism. And, you know, in my 3 weeks there, I went from kind of being assigned little things to do, transcribing, to like pitching my own stories and writing them up. So I think that it was so useful to get some bylines. And I think it helped me really hone those skills about like what is the story and what is the story for this specific publication. I think being able to think in the specific publication style is so important, and like OK is very different to other things I've done, and I think that's so helpful to learn.
Yeah, so that part of OK was the part you were doing alongside that the masters you did in magazine journalism. Let's touch upon that a bit more now. Magazine journalism obviously differs a lot from newspaper journalism that we do at the Boar. How did you decide that magazine journalism was the route for you? So obviously you did that internship at OK, but that was part of your masters. So how did you stumble upon magazine journalism? How did you choose that route?
I think I just always loved magazines growing up. You know, my parents have always read the Sunday Times, so I would always steal the Sunday Times style magazine and I would cut out the little pictures, and I had like a little pin board of like all the fun little like fonts and headlines and pictures. So I've just always loved magazines. I think once I decided I wanted to apply to City, I took a very close look at the differences between the newspaper and the magazine courses. They're actually very similar, or they were when I was looking. The only difference was kind of the modules that you could do. So I got to do, I think there were a couple of modules you could do on magazine that you couldn't do on newspaper, but also the huge benefit of City's magazine journalism course is it's those students who produce City's journalism alumni magazine called X City. So we do like a 2-week assessed production fortnight for that magazine, and it gets sent out to basically all of the journalism alumni, and City has some incredibly powerful and important alumni. So for them to be able to see your work is, you know, a huge asset, but also you get the chance to interview some of those people. So some of the people, you know, that we on that project interviewed were so cool and so exciting. So I think it's really beneficial, that project, that like not everyone got to do. And I would definitely bear that in mind if you're thinking of going to City.
During your time at City, you were also executive editor of Carrot magazine. How did that differ from your time at the Boar, and what kind of experience did you take from that?
Yeah, I think Carrot was a fun one. I was approached by Mansi, who was their editor. She was on the undergraduate journalism course. She found me, I think, like on Twitter, and had seen what I'd done at the Boar and really wanted to build up the Carrot's reputation and to get them into the Student Publication Association. So I was kind of brought on as like an expert, and I was really proud. We did end up, I think, being nominated for or ending up winning an SPA award. So that was really exciting. I think taking on that sort of like more expert advice role was really valuable to me. I hope that I was able to help them, and I think I wrote some fun articles on the side. So it was a great experience all round. And Mansi was so brilliant to work with, as were all the team.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing Carrot magazine at this year's SPAs, so it's definitely still going strong. Yeah.
So obviously, you went down that master's route, which is a route that so many people take after Warwick. I know a few of our graduates from this year are going down the master's route as well. But you touched upon reading newspapers when you were younger and doing that student journalism from your school and university as well. Was there any time that you considered any other routes into journalism, or were you always set on, once you knew you wanted to go into journalism, that master's was the path to go down?
I think for a long time, I wasn't set on doing a master's. My parents always kind of said, you get one degree and that's it. And obviously to do a master's, it's very difficult to do a master's without some kind of parental financials. Obviously, especially with City being in London, like living costs are so expensive. You get something like £10,500 as the postgraduate loan, which would cover your tuition fees, but not your maintenance costs. So it's a bit difficult to figure that out without parental support. So for a long time, I was kind of like, I'm not sure about that. I very much had to persuade my parents that that was the best route in. For a long time, I thought about perhaps going to News Associates and just doing a term. I thought about, I remember I went to an open day at Bloomberg and I asked some of the journalists there and they basically said, no one will hire you unless you're trained in media law. And also you really need a knowledge of shorthand. And so after I heard that, I kind of looked into doing like courses here and there, and journalists kind of consistently told me these sort of short 3-day courses on media law, like they wouldn't be convinced that that was all the knowledge you needed to get hired, because ultimately no one is going to hire you in a newsroom if they worry that you're going to get them sued. Like that's a basic skill that you need to have. So I settled on City because I felt like, you know, they had such a strong alumni. I, like you, had many friends in the years above me at Warwick who had also gone to City to do journalism. I felt like it was a really good course and it was exactly what I needed. The irony is I went to City and then decided not to do shorthand. So it was a roundabout, but I haven't needed it thus far, so not a loss.
So after you graduated from City, you went on to become a sub-editor at Tatler, which is the job you are still in now,
Yes.
and also that you've described as your dream job. So what was it like stepping into that role after your time at the Boar and City?
It was so nerve-wracking. I remember I was so excited. I had been picking up Tatler like consistently in the few months before I got the job to read. So it really had become like one of my favorite magazines. It's kind of known as like the Society Bible, but I think they also do such interesting kind of cultural features and political stories. Like some of the things I've had the chance to work on since I've been there have been so interesting and exciting. Yeah, I think I remember being really nervous. I think when you start a job, there's always that element of like, I think when applying for the job, you're so like, oh my God, I really hope I get it. And then you get it. And there's that moment of like, oh God, can I actually do this? What if they've made a big mistake? I'm pleased to say I passed my probation and I'm still there. So I must be doing something right. But yeah, I think it was an incredible opportunity to be able to work somewhere like that in my first job. I actually started like 2 weeks before I finished my master's at City. So I remember I would do my 9:30 to 5:30 in Vogue House, and then I would go home, go back to the City Library and work on my final project, which is like the journalism equivalent of a dissertation. And I would be sat there like editing my video I had to do on Premiere Pro and like building my website online and like finishing my article and finalizing my draft. So it was a lot of work, and I put that on myself literally because I was just so excited to start the role as soon as possible. It's funny now because I'm like, I have my whole life to work. Why didn't I just tell them I would start 2 weeks later at the end of my degree? But I remember when they offered me the job, I was like, I can be there on Monday. And the hiring manager was like, well, we were thinking like in a couple of weeks. I was just so keen and so excited.
That honestly, like, I mean, I think us at the Boar, we know how balancing our time can be an absolute nightmare. So like all credit to you for balancing that. And I can see why you'd want to go into your dream job as well, but you must have learned how to balance your time then. So is there any tips you have for balancing your time that you took from that experience?
I think just planning. I mean, honestly, that was a poor decision on my part to try and do both at once. I probably put too much on myself, but I think planning, and it really was that element of like having to do running the Boar and also my studies at Warwick at the same time that really gave me that ability to do both. It was a lot of late nights. I think I was like I'm someone who I like a good night's sleep. I don't really like doing academic work after like 6 p.m. I'm like, the evening is like my rest time. And I was working like until midnight every night. And I would literally shut the laptop, roll over, go to sleep. There was not even any like phone scrolling time. So you just got to be dedicated and plan your time really well. I swear by my phone calendar for organization. So I think that really helps.
Yeah, that's a good tip. In terms of your current role, a couple of questions, 2 in 1. Firstly, what does the role of sub-editor entail? And secondly, what does a typical day look like for you at Tatler?
So not everyone knows what a sub-editor is, so I always think it's good to ask. As a sub-editor, my responsibilities are to fact-check the copy, to correct any grammar mistakes, to ensure that everything is in the house style. So differing publications will have different styles on things like, are we using an M dash or an N dash, for example, or how are we spelling this particular word? So we have to make sure that everything's consistent for that publication. I cut all the copy in, so an article would come in a few words over the length. The designers put it on the page, and then I will cut words here and there to make sure it all fits nicely. And then I write the headline and the stand first. And Tatler has like a really witty style. So I have to think up intelligent puns and jokes for our headlines, which is always a bit of a challenge. My typical day involves really a combination of all of those things. So if I'm fact checking something, I'm liaising with the features team about any queries I have to get those tidied up. If I pick up something to sub, I'll cut in the copy, I'll give it a read through to make sure it's all nice and tidy and how styled, that the grammar's all correct, any like typos, things like that. I'll put a headline and cell on it. I'll write the image captions, and then I put it out on first proof. It's what we call the system where we basically upload the PDF to Google Drive, share it around the team, and everyone has their chance to comment, if they're like, there's a mistake here, or, we need to change this word here, or I'm not quite sure this cell is quite right. That's the time everyone can put in their feedback. And then we tidy it all up, take all those comments in, give it another proofread, and then we send it to our editor for approval.
Which sounds a very, very busy day. But one thing I think we're quite interested in, obviously, headlines are so important. You said that's part of your job. Do you have a favorite headline you've ever written? Can you remember?
I was thinking about this earlier because I had a feeling I was going to get asked this. You know what? I have a friend, my friend's boyfriend once said to me, he was like, I think it must be such a fun job to get to write like the headlines. And I was like, that's what I do. And he was like, oh my God, that's so cool. So very amusing. I think one of my top headlines had to be, we had a fragrance beauty page in our wedding guide, and I called it Sense and Sensibility. And I remember our editor was really thrilled with that one. Yeah.
Very good. Very good like that.
You can borrow that one.
Make a note of that one. And you cover so much in Tatler. You're talking about all the different sort of things that the magazine covers in itself, but you've also written a lot of stories for the publication. So you've recently written stories on Chateau in Bordeaux, Brit Boys at Wimbledon, and the rise of classical influences in media. Are there any moments or stories that stand out to you during your time at Tatler?
I've had so many incredible experiences at Tatler. I mean, it's funny, we were talking earlier about like invitations to review concerts and shows, and I have been able to do so many of those things at Tatler. The best perk of my job is definitely the press trips. So we all tend to get sent on like a couple of trips a year to go and review a hotel, which is what that chateau story was. I went to review a private chateau just outside of Bordeaux, which was like the most insane experience. I mean, I have done some incredible things. I went to the world premiere of Jurassic World Rebirth the other week, which is not very Tatler related, but that was like so cool to see Scarlett Johansson in the flesh. Earlier in the year, I reviewed the brand new Raffles Hotel on Sentosa in Singapore. I've stayed at Badrat's Palace in St. Moritz. I went to the Olympics last year to review their brand new like hospitality offerings, which was like just ridiculously insane. We had seats in the hospitality box right over the start line for the sprints. So, the most incredible view. And then they were wheeling into our little hospitality suite trolleys of like steak and potatoes dauphinoise. It's like while we were watching the athletics at the Olympics, it was the most ridiculously extravagant experience. And obviously I could never afford to do something like that. So I always say, you know, I've had so many like once in a lifetime experiences at Tatler, and I'm so lucky to be able to have done the things that I have.
Yeah,
And
that sounds
yeah, so
very cool.
yeah, I was going to say exactly. I think we're all a bit jealous of that, to be fair. But like you say, it's those opportunities you can get right through journalism as well. So it's right from the ball, right through to your job you do today. So that's like great to hear about. But we're gonna now, before we move on to your like last little bits of advice for up and coming journalists, we're gonna do some quick fire questions, which I think are always exciting. So I think we're gonna start with. You might be neither, but all journalists seem to really like tea or coffee. Are you a tea or coffee person?
I'm actually not really either. I've cut coffee because it's bad for my stomach. I'm now on chai tea.
Fair.
Nice.
There we go.
Yeah.
Nice. I couldn't get coffee out. Are you a morning person or night owl?
Oh, I'm definitely a morning person.
Do you prefer print or digital media?
I think there's nothing as exciting as holding like the physical product that you've produced in your hands.
I have to agree with that one.
Yeah, I agree. You've talked about all the opportunities you've had at Tatler, but if you could interview one person, who's your dream interview guest?
Oh my God. If I could interview Taylor Swift, I would just like die. I'm such a huge Swiftie, and I mean, I will never have the opportunity to interview her, but that would be insanely cool.
Yeah. I agree. One thing you always carry as a journalist, your journalism non-negotiable.
My phone. I mean, you can put everything in your phone. Like all my meetings are in there, all my to-do lists, and you know, to record your interviews, it's everything all in one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's your favorite thing to do after a long day at work?
Oh, going out for dinner. I had dinner at Ambassadors Clubhouse on Friday to review it, and it was just like everything was absolutely delicious. I had such a good time.
And we've touched upon your favorite headline, but what's your favorite article that you've ever written?
Oh, my favorite article that I've written. I'm trying to think of one I'm like particularly proud of. I can't think of any that I'm like, wow, that was such a great one. I don't know. Maybe I really like writing the travel ones. I think maybe even that one about the Paris Olympics. I think when you've been on such an incredible, sorry, this is so not a short fire answer. I think when you've been on such an incredible trip and you feel like everyone has done everything to make it such an amazing experience for you, the pressure to like get that down in good words and do justice to it is so immense. So I was really pleased with how that piece turned out.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, they were good. It was fairly quick. So.
Okay.
So we've got kind of our little closing section now. Another question that we kind of touch on in all of our podcasts is, what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone at the Boar now?
At the Boar now, I think make the most of the opportunity to do everything you can. You know, there was a time when I was applying for a job while I was still at Warwick that I ultimately missed out on. I got to the final round and I missed out on it because I didn't have enough of a background in news. And I think if I could go back, I think it worked out for the best that I didn't get that job. But if I had have wanted that job, I would have needed to do more original news reporting and investigations. And I think the Boar is such a brilliant ground to learn that. I think if you want to go into journalism, like take all the opportunity you can to do that original reporting, because those are the things that will really stand out on your CV and help you get a job.
And on a very similar note, if you could tell younger Jasmine, the Jasmine that was editor of her school newspaper and thought that was it for journalism, or the version that was EIC at the Boar, one thing, what would you say?
I think I just tell her it would all work out for the best. I think there are so many times when I've just been like so stressed, you know, at school, not knowing if I was like going to get into a good university, and then at university, not knowing if I was going to like get a job at the end of it. And, you know, I didn't just get a job, I got like a job that I love and was so excited about and so proud of. So I think maybe I would just tell her like, it's all going to be fine. Let's stop stressing quite so much and just like enjoy it.
I think that's advice that we probably can all tell ourselves. I mean, I think me, Rachel and Lucy, I think can probably take a bit of that advice as well. There's been probably quite a few people at the ball, but yeah, I think it's just realizing that everything can work out. And from what you've told us today, it sounds like everything has worked out amazingly for you. You've gone right from that school newspaper through to the ball, through to City, and through to Tatler, and it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. We hope everyone's enjoyed listening to Jasmine's conversation with us, and we'd just like to thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope everyone has enjoyed listening to me witter on too.
We hope you enjoyed listening to our conversation with Jasmine and our chat with Martin.
Hopefully today's episode has inspired you to get involved with the Boar. To keep the inspiration going, check out our website www.theboar.org and read the latest stories from our writers.
Next week, we'll be bringing you a bonus podcast episode, which includes an interview with a very exciting guest.
In the meantime, keep an eye out for clips and clues of the upcoming episode on our Instagram @Hogging the Mic.